Everyone has got an opinion on the new crop of draftees. Generally, it's very optimistic, and if you watch the Fox broadcast of this year's draft, it's all about what the players can do rather than focusing on their weaknesses. But going back through the past 10 years of the draft, a variety of players who had draft profiles or analysis done on them have turned out wrong, whether it's a part of their game that was labelled a weakness but is now a strength, or where the player's position in the AFL will be according to their junior performance. Here are some current day stars that the scouts got wrong. Starting at the top with Marcus Bontempelli. He was a unique player in his draft class with clubs split on his potential. A Fox Sports article spoke with an anonymous scout before the draft that noted between the clubs he was boom or bust, and right now boom is the word. The expert himself had a much lesser opinion on the Bont, labelling him just the 17th best player available. He explained the main reason was due to his inconsistency, which was fair, but also due to his lack of oomph and speed. I think it's fair to say that Bontempelli proved this expert wrong. He was 16 places off where Bontempelli should have been ranked and didn't see his physical improvements coming. He isn't lightning fast, but his long strides out of the centre make him impossible to stop when he gets going. The quote-unquote oomph part is totally off. At Bontempelli's size, he's now matched it with a mature body and he has big power in his game. He can win the ball in contests to feed it out or grab the ball himself and move into space. His field marking is another important part of his game that wasn't mentioned at all, making him so hard to contain when he's forward. This scout wasn't the only one to be more on the bust over boom side when it came to Bontempelli. It's hard to blame a draft profile for not exactly lining up the AFL position for Nick Blakey. He might be the most unique player in the entire competition. One of his draft profile's ending statements was that Blakey was an extremely highly rated junior who has the potential to develop into one of the league's best forwards. The overview does nail many attributes we see in his game today. It notes he has versatility because of his athleticism and cleanliness on the ground for his size. However, it doesn't mention his elite speed, which is what he's most known for streaming out of defence. His future position as a key forward was the main focus in the profile, but it did say he's shown that he's effective up forward through the midfield and has even shown potential as a key defender. Overall, it shows how rare a player like Nick Blakey is. How many players in history are touted as one of the best key forward prospects, but end up as a third tall defender or halfback rebounder? He might be the first. His weight was also a focus, with his 80 kilogram frame at the time being highlighted as a weakness and something he needed to address. 5 years later, Blakey weighs just 3 kilograms more, and that number won't rise up much more in his career due to the role he plays, needing his speed and agility. One of the more bizarre profiles is Collingwood defender Braden Maynard. The player this analysis compared his game style with was Paul Puopolo. In a physical sense, they are pretty much the complete opposite. The draft guide had Maynard playing as a small forward in the AFL at 186 centimetres and 88 kilograms, which would make him the biggest small forward in history. The in-game attributes and abilities of Maynard are correctly highlighted in the report. It describes Maynard's play style as he seems to have a basic, no-frills approach to footy. That is, if you have the ball, kick it through the goals. If you don't have the ball, tackle your opponent and then kick it through the goals. He's not one to flaunt his ability too much and is a team player. It sums him up pretty well. His one-on-one ability, which is a key part of his game, was also pointed out. His endurance was a weak point, but it doesn't seem to matter as of right now and was only flagged because of a potential midfield move further down the AFL. That hasn't happened, and Maynard will likely stay as one of the best lockdown defenders for his career. He definitely won't be a small forward, but will be happy enough clamping down on them from kicking goals. He's the best key forward in the competition, but Charlie Curnow's future back in 2015 wasn't as clear. At this time, a draft profile had him compared with Jake Stringer, seeing him more as a midfielder and medium-sized forward at AFL level. He's not elite in either position, and rather a very solid player who has game-breaking ability. At least the end half of this statement has translated through his career. The best part of Curnow's game his unbelievable marking was highlighted. In terms of Curnow's strengths, his contested marking is the biggest thing that physically makes him stand out from the crowd. For someone who is not the biggest full forward, Curnow crashes packs, leaps over players, and becomes that big forward target that players can kick to and rely on to take a grab. However, the report identifies him more as a third tall midfielder than the power forward he has become today. Right now, he will play that third tall who might drift through the midfield, but a permanent midfield role would be an unknown. Curnow is such a talented player, he probably could play some midfield minutes, but he belongs inside 50. It did take him a while to get his body strong and injury free to take up the number one forward mantle. He's certainly no medium tall for the Blues. Zach Bailey was touted far more as an inside midfielder than the forward half player he is for the Brisbane Lions. His initial quote described him as a speedy, small, inside midfielder who wins the contested ball. His quickness was detailed throughout the profile and has been his weapon playing at AFL level. His goal kicking and game breaking ability was not detailed as much. Listed under his improvements was hitting the scoreboard. At 180 centimetres, there will be times where he will need to be utilised up forward, and with his tackling and speed, it will make him a dangerous prospect, but he needs to show he can hit the scoreboard and kick goals. This is what he has exactly done, kicking 121 goals in his first 6 seasons. Maybe he has learnt some forward craft being in the AFL system, but his creativity has made him so dynamic, the opposite of the contested ball tackling machine he is described as in the analysis. His last 3 years specifically have returns of 31, 37 and 29 goals. One of Sydney's brightest and best young midfielders in Chad Warner had an interesting comparison to former Eagle and Lion Jack Redden. His initial draft profile had him described as a hard-working, contested style midfielder who lacked the speed to be a first round pick. While he does not boast explosive speed, Warner has shown ability to get from contest to contest, often throwing his body around like a battering ram to win the hardball for his team. Perhaps he didn't time well in the sprints or repeat running tests because Warner has the X factor in the midfield. He isn't Charlie Cameron quick, but there are countless examples of him in space using his legs to find teammates or kick goals. Warner still provides the contested ability needed to play midfield, but he is much more than the battling, tough on-baller pictured through his profile. 35 goals in his last 45 games is a massive return for a midfielder. His handballing was also seen as his main weapon, but in his entire AFL career, he's averaged 13 kicks to only 8.6 handballs. For the Swans, Warner is their attacking on-baller who uses force to get the ball forward. His overall athleticism is far greater than his analysis portrays, and he has turned out to be much more than just a solid midfielder. There are a few examples of players who did 180s from their draft year. It will be interesting to see how this season's draftees develop into the future and how different they become to their initial descriptions.